It's been a little over a week since the Devils were eliminated from playoff contention. What did I think of the season in general? And what should the Devils do now that we're officially in the off season? We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Steven stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, College Hockey Club play announcer, Devils Wire Pucks Pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. Welcome to the first episode of the off season. If you're wondering where I've been the last few days, don't worry, nothing bad happened. But after the Devils were eliminated from the playoffs, I decided to go on a mini vacation to the happiest place on earth, Disney World. Some hockey players like to go to the golf course after the season ends. I like to go to the castle. But I am back and better than ever. And we have a long off season ahead of us. And I did have the chance to attend exit interviews. So I have some nice ideas in the works. And I can't wait to share it with you guys. But before we get into like the exit interview breakdowns like I do every single season, let's do a retrospective segment. And that's what we're going to do on today's episode. In the first segment, I will share some of my main takeaways from this season. Was it a success? What went right? What went wrong? Basically want to give you guys my mindset as we are now officially in the off season. Hope you guys are still enjoying the rest of the playoffs, though. Then in the second segment, the Devils signed a highly touted prospect to an entry-level contract. There is a catch. He is only signed for one season. Arseniy Gritsyuk. A lot of people have a lot of expectations for him. He killed it in the KHL. What are my expectations for him? And then in the third and final segment, when this episode goes live, Tom Fitzgerald and Sheldon Keefe will have their respective exit interviews. Unfortunately, I won't be in attendance for that. But I do have some questions for Tom Fitzgerald that I hope gets answered. All right, let's talk about this season in general for the Devils. They finished with an overall record of 42, 33, and 7. They finished third in the Metropolitan Division, and they had 91 points. They qualified for the playoffs for the second time in 3 seasons, but ironically, for the second time in 3 seasons, they were eliminated by the Hurricanes in 5 games in overtime via power play. That is a layer of weird on weird on weird, if you ask me. The irony is certainly not lost. I think it's safe to say that the Devils were still inconsistent. One of the jokes I said last season was that the only thing consistent about the Devils were their inconsistencies because they didn't win no more than 3 games in a row. However, they didn't lose no more than 3 in a row. Now, finishing with 91 points, like I said, the Devils did qualify for the playoffs and they had one of the top 3 best records in the Metro. But if we look to last season, if the Devils had 91 points, they'd be in the same position as the Washington Capitals. What happened to the Capitals that season? They barely squeaked into the wild card. They secured the second and final wild card position, but they were handled in 4 games by the Rangers. Ovechkin in that series, he was basically a traffic cone. I think it's safe to say that the Metro wasn't as strong this year as it was last year because despite all the Devils' inconsistencies, they never dropped out of the top 3, which I found rather impressive. In their final 10 games to close out the regular season, the Devils had a record of 5-5. Goes to show you how inconsistent they were. Now, the big question is, was this season a failure? Going into this season, my expectations were simple: playoffs or bust. But I didn't anticipate for the Devils to be that depleted heading into the playoffs. And as the series progressed, it went from bad to worse. So much so that Jonas Siegenthaler, who hadn't played in a game since before the Four Nations break, he had to see a lot of minutes because players like Jonathan Kovacevic were going down with an injury. Brett Pesce, he wasn't 100% once the series concluded. Dougie Hamilton, he was also recovering from injury. Injuries with this team are just a recurring theme. To make matters worse, Luke Hughes and Jesper Bratt, of all players, had to get shoulder surgery not too long ago. Now, they are expected to make a full recovery come training camp, but the fact that Jesper Bratt was dealing with something so bad to the point that he elected to get surgery, it goes to show you that this team is just not healthy. So when I think of this season in general, yes, they reached the goal of making the playoffs, but let's face it, they limped across the finish line. And after the Christmas break, I think there are a lot more questions surrounding the Devils. So I hate to do this, but I honestly think this season was a failure because I think the Devils took a couple steps backwards. I think everyone had higher expectations for the Devils. And the fact that everything that could have gone wrong for them went wrong before the start of the playoffs, it definitely left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. Because just think of the players that either got surgery or were dealing with a long-term injury. I just said Jesper Bratt, Luke Hughes, Jack Hughes, players that were out for a significant amount of time, Jonas Siegenthaler, Dougie Hamilton, the list goes on. So that leaves me a little concerned. Like, how can the Devils stay healthy? Because they can't continue to do this where we have high expectations for them going into the season. And then come the end of the season, they're basically in and out of the ER. That can't happen. Something's got to change. And I think you do have to have those tough discussions. Like, realistically, as presently constructed, how far can the Devils go? I haven't given up on the core. Who do I consider a part of the core? Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, Timo Meier. I think all those players are good when healthy, but that's the big thing. Can they all remain healthy so that way the Devils can make a deep playoff push? The Devils might have to make a splashy move, but the problem is like, who do you deal away? And it's way easier said than done because players with a no movement clause, Meier, Bratt, Palat, Hamilton, Markstrom, players with a no trade clause, Pesce, Dillon, players with a modified no trade clause, Haula, Hischier, Siegenthaler, Nason. It's just like, I understand that people want the Devils to make that big time move, but I said it during the trade deadline. It's easier said than done, given the fact that I don't think the Devils have that many valuable assets. They don't own a first round draft pick this year. So how do they go about that? That's the big thing. Can you get Dougie Hamilton to waive his no movement clause? Can you get Andre Palat to waive his no movement clause? That's the big question mark that a lot of people have, because let's face it, Erik Haula, even though he has a modified no trade clause, his value is not really high. Dawson Mercer's value, I don't think it's at a high right now. I think it's gone down. So you're going to have to include him in a package deal. The Devils definitely need more depth. And I think this is something that people need to talk more about, which is people were wondering, why did the Devils offense take a step backwards compared to last season? Here's the thing. Did you forget about Tyler Toffoli and what he brought to the roster prior to the trade deadline. Who did the Devils have at the time? Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, Timo Meyer, sometimes Dawson Mercer, but Tyler Toffoli was a big X factor piece. He added more scoring depth for the Devils. He gave them another option, another bona fide scorer. And I think Tom Fitzgerald did want to bring him back. Unfortunately, they couldn't come to an agreement when it came to a contract extension. So Fitzy had to do the tough thing and deal him away come the trade deadline, especially since the Devils weren't going to be competing for a playoff spot. It was pretty much a long shot. That's what the Devils have been missing. Nason, Cotter, Hala, they got off to hot starts, but as the season progressed, they came back crashing down. So you got to fix that a little bit. So that's my thing. I know the Devils made the playoffs, but this is not the manner in which I wanted them to reach the playoffs. It seems like there's a lot of question marks surrounding this team, and it seems like a lot of people are less confident in them compared to how they were at the start of the season. Like if you were to ask a lot of people at the start of the season, I think a lot of people were saying if the Devils stay healthy, they could be a cup contender if all goes well for them. They could be one of the top teams in the Metro. Like, I'm not saying number 3, I'm saying number 1. But after this season, a lot of people aren't too sure anymore. And like I said, you might have to have some tough conversations. So I hate to be this person, but I know a lot of things didn't go their way, but considering the fact that there are just a lot of question marks and a lot of people are unsure with the direction that the Devils go in, I would say this season, maybe it wasn't a complete failure, but I think the Devils fell short of expectations. I think that's a fair assessment. So in a sense, yes, it was a failure because the Devils were supposed to be way better than what they were advertised. Okay, we're going to talk about Arseniy Gritsyuk momentarily, but before we continue, let me tell you guys about Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you stop just mismanaging your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Okay, let's talk about Arseniy Gritsyuk, a highly touted Devils prospect, and my colleague over at Pucks and Pitchforks, Joseph Stanislaw, aka Jersey Joe, has been high on Gritsyuk for the past few seasons. So I will read you guys the PR report, then the scouting report, and give you guys my expectations for Mr. Gritsyuk. The Devils announced on Tuesday that they signed Gritsyuk to a one-year entry-level contract starting in 2025-2026. If you're wondering why it's only 1 year, it's because Gritsyuk is 24 years of age. The entry-level contract standard changes as you grow older. So if you're like the Hughes brothers and signed your entry-level contract when you were still teenagers, then it would be 3 years. But I think you guys get the point of it. I explained it in a prior episode. Gritsyuk has spent parts of the last 5 seasons in the KHL. During the 2024-2025 season with St. Petersburg, he recorded 44 points, 17 goals, 27 assists in 49 regular season games. He stands 6 feet, weighs 195 pounds. He ranked in the top 5 for points, goals, and assists among St. Petersburg skaters. Gritsyuk also contributed 5 points in 6 playoff games, tying him for the team lead. The Devils selected Gritsyuk in the 5th round, 129th overall, in the 2019 NHL Draft. Here's a quick scouting report on Gritsyuk, courtesy of Elite Prospects. He gets to his top speed easily and quickly and has a knack for creating separation between himself and defenders. Gritsyuk had himself quite the showing in the KHL. If you're curious, he appeared in 216 career KHL games. He had 68 goals, 84 assists for a grand total of 152 points. I think Gritsyuk's future is definitely bright. But what are my expectations for him? We were talking about this in the Pucks and Pitchforks group chat. First and foremost, I think Gritsyuk can definitely make an impact for the Devils. But I want to keep my expectations somewhat moderate. I don't want to put too much pressure on his shoulders. So when I see people saying that he's going to be like a top 6 player, that's going to be the contributor for the Devils, I'm just like, okay, let's slow our roll here. Could that happen? Sure. But let's be realistic here. The Devils still need to go out and get somebody, whether it's in free agency or via the trade market. Gritsyuk is not going to be the answer, but he can be useful. Like I said, we were talking about this in the Pucks and Pitchforks group chat. I think at one point somebody said that if Gritsyuk scores 15 goals, then I think that's more than enough. That's what he's supposed to do. But I'm really excited for Gritsyuk. I think it's safe to say. And you know what? I know a lot of people wanted to see him during the playoffs. People were wondering, what's the holdup? Well, it kind of makes sense. Like I said, you can only sign Gritsyuk to a 1-year entry-level contract. And once that expires after the 2024-2025 season, then you're in a bit of a pickle. But it was smart for him to sign his entry-level contract now. Let's see what he can do with a full NHL season ahead of him. I have big expectations for him. We'll see what this 6-foot left winger has in store. All right. We're going to talk about the upcoming exit interview for Tom Fitzgerald and Sheldon Keefe. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about Game Time. The Stanley Cup playoffs are here. And if you've never been to a live NHL game, it's unlike anything else. The intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it's next level. And thanks to Game Time, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever. Game Time is the fastest way to grab playoff tickets, even for those must-see matchups. Prices actually drop as puck drop gets closer. And with last-minute deals, you can save up to 60%. Their all-in pricing shows total upfront, no surprise fees at checkout. The app even shows you great views of your seat so you know exactly what you're getting before you buy. And with Game Time ticket coverage, I know I'm protected, whether it's cancellation protection, job loss insurance, or their 24-hour return guaranteed. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And now, a word from Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time with Upwork. You can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives business flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivered incredible results. Visit Upwork.com right now. Post your job for free. That's Upwork.com, Upwork.com to connect with the top talent and grow your business today. All right. Like I said, Tom Fitzgerald is scheduled to do his exit interview when this episode goes live. Like I said in the first segment, I had the chance to attend the players' exit interviews and ask some questions. Unfortunately, players like Jack Hughes, Luke Hughes, and Brian Dumoulin, they were not present for that particular day. Well, Jack was in the building, but he elected not to speak to the media. But I'll talk about that in a future episode because it's been a big talking point on social media. But digressing a little bit, here are some things I hope Tom Fitzgerald is asked during his press conference. The big thing is injury prevention, because if we look at the core players for the Devils, Jack Hughes, season-ending shoulder surgery, back-to-back seasons. Jesper Bratt, shoulder surgery. Timo Meier, surgery after last season concluded. Nico Hischier, he's dealt with injuries, but they're more head-related. Like, he dealt with a concussion last season, and it was just bad circumstances. Dougie Hamilton, he's dealt with a lot of injuries during his tenure with the Devils. Luckily, he was able to return come the playoffs, but you get the gist of it. A lot of these star players for the Devils have either been injured and been out long-term, or they've needed to get surgery. This cannot continue to happen. Something needs to be done. I get injuries are complex. No player wants to deal with it. And no athlete is going to be like LeBron James, who is 40 years old, deals with little to no injury, still playing at the top of his game despite his age. That's almost an improbable ask. But I don't think it's too much to ask, like, can something be prevented? Is there anything humanly possible that the Devils can do to cut down on the injuries a little bit? Because it seems like we do the same song and dance routine year after year after year. What could the Devils do if healthy? I'm tired of this discussion. I'm tired of talking about this same point year after year after year. I know I'm going to have to talk about it later in the offseason once we preview the 2025-2026 season. I really don't want to talk about what-if scenarios. What about the now? What can the Devils do to cut down on injuries? What can they do to, like, strengthen up their players just a little bit? I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities. Injuries are a part of the game, but something needs to change because the Devils can't continue to have core assets get surgeries. It seems like the Devils get a discount for shoulder surgeries. It's like the Oprah thing, like, you get a shoulder surgery, you get a shoulder surgery. Everybody gets a shoulder surgery. No. Second thing is, what's the mindset going into the offseason? What do the Devils need? They need more scoring depth. I talked about it in the first segment. I think this team honestly misses Tyler Toffoli and what he was able to bring, because we knew Jesper Bratt could rack up the points. We knew Jack Hughes could rack up the points. We know Nico Hischier, he could get his name into the scorer's sheet. We know players like Timo Meier and Nico Hischier, they can contribute. But you know who is very underrated and someone that I think a lot of the Devils discourse forgot about? Tyler Toffoli. And I miss him, if I'm being completely honest. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, he's older, he's not the fastest skater. And yes, you're right, but numbers don't lie. In 61 games played for the Devils, Tyler Toffoli had 26 goals, 18 assists for a grand total of 44 points. Who else outside of Hughes, Bratt, Hischier, Meier, who's capable of doing that? Just saying, like, the Devils have been searching for that. Nason can't do that. Cotter can't do that. Haula can't do that. The Devils need more depth, and Tyler Toffoli provided that during his 61-game tenure with the Devils. And the third thing is, will the Devils make a splashy move? I don't want to hear Fitzy say, oh, the Devils came in second ever again. Okay, what can you do to become number one? Because rumors were circulating that the Devils were in the running for Ryan O'Reilly, but Barry Trotz wanted an unfair offer of Mercer, a draft pick, and Shimon Nemitz, which I'm like, come on now. If that's true, that's too big of an ask. Mikko Rantanen, I don't think the Hurricanes were going to help out the Devils. I just didn't see any possibility of the Devils and Hurricanes reaching an agreement. Maybe it reached like phone calls, but anyway, the point I'm just trying to make is the Devils need to do something drastic here, if you ask me. They might have to make a difficult decision, but it's easier said than done because Andre Palat, he has no movement clause. Same with Dougie Hamilton. Eric Halla's value is not really all that high. Let's be real. So I don't know what the future has in store for the Devils, but I really hope those questions are asked toward Tom Fitzgerald so that way we can address it on this show. Let me know your thoughts. What did you think of the Devils season in general? What would you like to see them do come the off season? Also, are you excited for Arseniy Gritsyuk? Leave a comment down below. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X Page app at TrainMat4 or the show's X Page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again here on Locked On Devils, your team every day.